The most important person in the world can't fly off to the most dangerous place in the world.
Who else can?
No one. They knew the risk when they left. You can't win the throne if you're dead. You can't break the wheel if you're dead.
It's dangerous for everybody involved. I'm sure it's good for both of them in the moment, but you don't even get the relief of how beautiful it could be or should be. It's not good. But it should be, but it's not.
Just as everything was coming together, everyone was going to join together to fight, inevitably Game of Thrones will tear us apart once more.
Hey everybody, so there's all kinds of Tyrion stuff happening in Season 8. Peter Dinklage just made a lot of comments before the season, after the season, in the clip that I just included that suggests a little bit about what the basis for the conflict within Team Daenerys is going to be all about. Because you have Jon Snow and Daenerys coming together, you have Tyrion who's really worried about it, and then Bran also making comments about how this is going to tear us all apart, and that's just part of Game of Thrones. That's just part of the fun of the story. Just as you come together, something inevitably tears you apart. So I've sort of already done general predictions for all the storylines, but I wanted to do a Tyrion video because there's some really cool stuff that was circulating right around the finale that goes all the way back to George R. R. Martin's original outline, which suggests a couple possible outcomes for Tyrion, Daenerys, Jon Snow. So I'll try to explain all this and then how I think it'll actually end up going down, because some of this I believe, some of this I do not believe, but it's actually a valid theory, which is like the other most fun part of Game of Thrones, is coming up with fan theories. So just careful for spoilers for everything that's happened on the season so far. So a lot of people saw this moment in the finale and they wondered what was going on in Tyrion's head. There was a quote from Peter Dinklage in the clip that I included where he is just absolutely terrified of what's going to happen now that Jon Snow and Daenerys are actually getting together. Like, they came together as allies. Now they're getting together for both sex, and he's starting to get really worried, which is why I included that other clip too. If you die, if something bad happens to you, then we're all lost. So we haven't quite got to the point where we have all the Starks and all of Team Daenerys in the same place at once. But as you can see from the clips, Tyrion only cares about Daenerys. He thinks that she is the promised one. He might not totally believe in the prophecy, but he believes that she is the one that's going to bring this all together. So while he doesn't think that Jon Snow is a liar like we saw earlier in the season, we spent time together. I do trust what he says.
Heroes do stupid things and they die.
He's more worried about what Jon Snow is going to do in all this, so you can sort of see where the dividing line is. You have Tyrion, Varys, Daenerys, and then on the other side of this, you have all the Stark children and Jon Snow. Like Isaac Hempstead Wright has already said that the other Stark children won't think of Jon Snow differently when they find out about his secret Targaryen heritage. He'll still be Jon Snow, their brother. They're not going to call him some different name. But it just sort of establishes where everyone's allegiances are. So Tyrion really cares about Daenerys. I know a lot of people think that there's more behind that, and I'll explain why, because it's George R. R. Martin's original outline for Game of Thrones, and that's sort of the basis for this theory, is that if you've forgotten about it, a couple years ago, George R. R. Martin's original treatment for Game of Thrones, he had a sort of 3-book outline where he had character arcs mapped out, was leaked onto the internet, and part of that plot was this big Arya storyline where Tyrion and Jon Snow would battle for her affections. So if you hadn't picked up on it already, George R. R. Martin is all about the incest struggle. We have the Lannisters, we have the Targaryen family and the history of Westeros, now we have Jon Snow and Daenerys. But it's just that instead of on the TV show as we see now, Jon Snow and Daenerys getting that storyline, it was going to be Arya and Jon Snow, and presumably that version of Arya was going to be much older. So just forget about Maisie Williams. The story ended up being much different. He expanded it into the 7 books that we see now, and the story sort of shifted to Jon Snow and Daenerys. But in the way that Dan and Dave sort of circle back around and grab old plot lines and old ideas, a lot of people think that that's where this Tyrion look comes from, is that it's going to sort of serve as the basis for Season 8 conflict, because even though you may not have believed that Jon Snow and Sansa would have spent all that time arguing in Winterfell at the beginning of the season, they still did that, even though I totally didn't buy that it was going to happen. And obviously the outcome is that they recognized that they were brother and sister and they needed to work together. Jon Snow truly believed in her and handed the North to her as wardeness while he was away. The other less gross side of this is Tyrion has been Daenerys' closest advisor. She looks to him, but around the middle of the season, towards the end, she started to look to Jon Snow. Like anytime there was a decision to be made, Jon Snow would speak up, she would just look to him and say, okay, that's what we're going to do. Jon was the one that sold her on the plan to go north of the Wall, even though it was originally Tyrion's plan. However bad that you thought that plan was. Jon was also the one that suggested boat to go to White Harbor so that we could get to boat sex, whether or not that was actually on his mind. There was this sort of implied romance that was going on between them while they were at Dragonstone. You have to imagine that because of the way the show jumps in time, that they were together on Dragonstone for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's just that they didn't spell that out. It's just, when you see Euron flying all over the place like he's teleporting, you just have to remember that there are great stretches of time even between individual scenes within episodes. So even though it doesn't seem like they've been together for a while, they've actually been together for almost a year by the end of the season. So like back during episode 4, when Daenerys gets really curious and excited about the idea of what happened with Grey Worm, and they give each other that knowing look when Jon Snow walks up, it just implies that that was going on in the background the whole time, and the show just chose not to show a lot of it. You cut to the end of the season, Daenerys is ready to throw her life away and take her greatest asset, her dragons, up north of the Wall to rescue Jon Snow from this crazy plan, and Tyrion is trying to do everything he can to stop her. If you're lost, everything is lost. And she's just like, hard pass, I've already put on my winter gear. Even Ser Jorah has sort of made his peace with it. Like at the end of the season when they're like, we'll take the boat, and Ser Jorah sort of looks at the look that Jon Snow shares with Daenerys and is like, oh, I get what's going on here. Okay, whatever. But based on this look that Tyrion gives them at the end, it seems like he is the one person inside Team Daenerys who just is not cool with any of this, however Varys feels about it. He might shrug a little bit, but it seems like he's mostly Team Tyrion. So if Tyrion was really worried about something and wanted to stop this Jon Snow-Daenerys thing, then Varys would probably back his play. So it seems like the show really is building towards the reveal of Jon Snow being a Targaryen, them doing the George R. Martin incest struggle thing, like, how do we deal with our relationship? What does this mean now that we're related? That doesn't even get into the idea that Jon Snow is now ahead of Daenerys in the line of succession. That's like a sort of an extra layer on top of things that we can talk about in another video. But in this moment here, Tyrion doesn't know anything about that, so he's already probably going to try and tear them apart just to keep this from blowing up in their faces. Like, let's keep this above board until the War for the Dawn is over. Then once Daenerys is on the throne, she can take as many suitors as she wants. But if there's any real tension between Tyrion and Jon, it'll probably be more over who Daenerys is listening to. Not so much the affection of Daenerys, but the attention of Daenerys. Because even though Jon Snow has a lot of good ideas, he's also had a lot of bad ideas, just like Tyrion. But I think arguably most of Tyrion's bad ideas can be blamed on sort of the contrivance of Season 7 in the idea that they want to balance the scales for Team Lannister and Team Daenerys. So I've already talked a little bit about how they're setting Jaime up for Season 8, like they want him to seem like a good battle commander so that he can fill that role for Daenerys, because Tyrion is terrible at battle planning on the TV show, even though I don't think that that's true to the character. So you have to imagine that Jon Snow is going to be riding on Rhaegal with Daenerys while she's on Drogon, so you actually need somebody on the ground to lead the army, and that's really where Jaime comes in. But speaking of Tyrion not being so hot with the idea of incest in Jon Snow and Daenerys, can you imagine what Jaime is going to say about all this when he gets up there and he also learns the truth of the matter? Now, he might be sympathetic to Jon, but he also would probably say that it's not a good idea to. So that's just something else to think about. Everybody not being really cool with the idea of Jon Snow and Daenerys getting together. But there's this great sense of inevitability. So as we do more bonus videos in the off-season and we learn a little bit about what's going on with the characters, we can start talking about the way it'll actually play down. But ultimately, I'm an optimist. So just like they did with the Winterfell plot, with Arya and Sansa, with Jon and Sansa, they'll resolve their differences. Everything will come together by the end. It's just a question of how that's going to happen. So let me know in the comments, what do you think that Tyrion is going to do in Season 8 to try and get between Jon Snow and Daenerys? And do you think it'll only be political, or do you actually think that he cares about Daenerys in a much deeper way? So because we're sliding into Season 8 stuff, what's going to happen is my Q&A tomorrow will be a Season 8 focus Q&A. But if there's any question that you want me to include in that, just write it below in the comments. I will keep doing weekly Q&As in addition to bonus videos as long as people are interested in it. So just submit all the stuff that you guys want me to put in that. But there is a new round of that Game of Thrones giveaway. It's for HBO Now subscriptions. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber, leave a comment on this video. Congratulations to the last winner, Ed F. Please private message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact details. You can click here for my broader Season 8 predictions, and you can click here to learn all about Aegon Targaryen. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.